What happens when a Hollywood icon known for staying cool under pressure suddenly finds himself pushed into a corner on live television? And this time, he doesn't back down. Make sure to subscribe to the Star Talks and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The camera opens on the familiar set of The View, the audience already buzzing with energy. The hosts are seated around the table, smiling, papers in hand, coffee mugs placed neatly in front of them. There's a lightness in the air at first. Typical morning chatter, quick laughs, the kind of rhythm regular viewers expect. Then the introduction begins. Joining us today, one of the hosts says with a bright smile, is an actor who redefined one of the most iconic roles in cinema. You know him from the James Bond franchise. Please welcome Daniel Craig. The audience erupts into applause as Daniel walks in, offering a polite smile, giving a small wave. He looks composed, relaxed, tailored suit, calm demeanor, the kind of presence that usually diffuses any tension before it even starts. He takes his seat, exchanges greetings, and the conversation begins casually. So, Daniel, another host leans in, smiling warmly, you've officially stepped away from Bond. How does it feel to close that chapter? Daniel nods slightly thoughtful. It feels right. It was the right time. I gave everything I had to it. There's a murmur of appreciation from the audience. A few nods from the panel. The conversation flows easily. Talk of his career, the pressure of playing Bond, the physical demands, even a light joke about injuries on set that gets a laugh. Then, as often happens on live television, the tone shifts, subtly at first. Joy Behar leans forward, her expression curious but slightly sharper than before. You've talked a lot about how demanding that role was, she says. But some people would say, well, you signed up for it. You knew what Bond was. So why all the complaints over the years? There's a small pause. Daniel blinks once, not caught off guard exactly, but clearly registering the shift. I wouldn't call them complaints, he replies evenly. I was being honest about the experience. Joy tilts her head slightly. But you did say at one point you'd rather, slash your wrists than do another Bond film. A ripple goes through the audience, some laughter, some discomfort. Daniel exhales quietly. That comment's been taken out of context for years. Joy doesn't pull back. Well, it was a pretty strong statement. Another host quickly jumps in, trying to soften things. I think what Daniel meant was. But Daniel raises a hand slightly, not dismissive, just firm. No, it's all right, he says calmly. I can explain it. Now the energy has changed. The audience leans in. The hosts exchange quick glances. This is no longer just a promotional interview. It was after a long shoot, Daniel continues. I was exhausted, physically and mentally. I spoke poorly in that moment, sure, but it wasn't about disrespecting the role. Joy presses again, her tone still conversational but undeniably pointed. But fans take that seriously. Bond is sacred to a lot of people. Daniel nods. And I respect that. Deeply. But do you understand, Joy adds, why people might feel like you didn't? There's a beat. Daniel's expression tightens, not angry, but more direct now. I think people sometimes prefer headlines over truth. The audience reacts, some claps, some murmurs. Joy raises an eyebrow. So it's the media's fault? Daniel shakes his head slightly. No, I'm saying things get simplified, reduced, and then repeated. Another host interjects gently, sensing the tension building. That happens a lot in this industry, right? Daniel nods, appreciative of the attempt to balance things. It does, but Joy isn't done. Or, she says, leaning back slightly, sometimes people just say what they feel in the moment, and later wish they hadn't. The audience goes quiet. Daniel looks directly at her now. Not confrontational, but steady. Of course, he says. We're all human. Joy smiles, but there's an edge to it. Exactly. There's a brief silence at the table. One of the other hosts quickly jumps in again, trying to pivot. So, Daniel, what's next for you? Now that Bond is behind you. But the shift has already happened. The easy rhythm is gone. Daniel answers, but there's a different tone now, more measured, less relaxed. I'm looking for roles that challenge me in different ways, he says. Smaller projects, maybe. Things that aren't defined by expectation. Joy cuts in again. So no more big franchises? A light laugh from the audience, but it feels thinner now. Daniel smiles faintly. Never say never. But I'm not chasing that. Joy nods slowly. Some actors would love to be in that position. Daniel's smile fades just slightly. I'm aware. The tension is no longer subtle. One of the hosts tries to lighten things again. I think what Joy's getting at is, there's a lot of pressure that comes with success like that. Daniel nods. There is. Joy adds quickly, and scrutiny. Daniel glances at her. Yes, that too. Another pause. The audience senses it now. This isn't just conversation anymore. It's edging toward something sharper. Joy leans forward again, her tone shifting just enough to make it noticeable. Do you ever feel like, maybe you came across as ungrateful at times? A few audible reactions from the audience, some gasps, some whispers. Daniel doesn't answer immediately. He folds his hands lightly on the table, looking down for a brief second before looking back up. No, he says simply. Joy blinks, slightly surprised by the firmness. No, Daniel repeats, calm but unwavering. I don't think honesty is the same as ingratitude. The audience responds, this time louder. A mix of applause and tension. One host lets out a small okay, trying to ease things again, but the moment has already landed. Joy tilts her head again, studying him. Some people might disagree. Daniel nods once. That's their right. There's a quiet standoff now, not explosive but unmistakable. The kind of moment live television thrives on. And for the first time since he walked out, Daniel Craig isn't just a guest promoting a project. He's in it now, and everyone watching can feel it. The air at the table doesn't settle, it thickens. Daniel's last words are still hanging there, and you can feel the audience waiting to see who moves next. A few scattered claps fade out, replaced by that quiet, watchful silence that only happens when something real starts to unfold on live TV. Joy leans back slightly in her chair, tapping her fingers once on the table, her expression calm but clearly engaged. She's not smiling now. Well, she says almost casually, honesty is one thing. Public perception is another. Daniel nods, but there's less softness in it this time. That's true. And perception, Joy continues, is what people remember, not the explanation afterward. Another host jumps in, trying to balance the tone. But to be fair, Daniel, actors are often asked questions when they're exhausted, pushed. Sometimes they say things they don't mean in that exact way. Daniel glances toward her with a small, appreciative look. Exactly. Joy doesn't interrupt, but she doesn't fully agree either. But you're also very experienced, she says. You know how this works. A few murmurs ripple through the audience. Daniel lets out a small breath, almost like a quiet reset. I do, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stop being human in interviews. That lands. The audience reacts with a mix of claps and soft sounds. Joy tilts her head again. No one's asking you to stop being human. Daniel looks directly at her. It can feel that way. Now the tension sharpens, not louder but clearer. One of the other hosts leans forward, voice gentle but purposeful. Do you feel like you've been misunderstood over the years? Daniel answers without hesitation. Yes. Joy quickly follows. Or misrepresented? Daniel pauses this time. Both. There's a brief silence, then the audience claps again. This time more unified, like they're acknowledging something deeper. Joy crosses her arms lightly, not defensive but settled in. But isn't part of being in a role like Bond managing that perception? Daniel nods slowly. To a degree. And did you? She asks. That question hangs heavier than the others. Daniel doesn't rush it. He shifts slightly in his seat, his posture still composed but more grounded now, less casual than when he first sat down. I think I did the job I was hired to do, he says. I gave everything to that role. Physically, emotionally, years of my life. The audience reacts, this time more supportive. A few louder claps, a couple of yeah voices. Joy acknowledges it with a quick glance, but keeps her focus on him. No one's denying that. Daniel nods. It sometimes feels like that's overlooked. Another host leans in quickly. I don't think it's overlooked. I think it's just that people connect emotionally to characters like Bond. So when they hear something negative, Daniel finishes her thought calmly. It feels personal. She nods. Exactly. Joy adds, because it is personal for fans. Daniel turns slightly toward her. And it was personal for me too. That line lands hard. The audience reacts instantly, stronger applause, a few people leaning forward in their seats. Joy doesn't interrupt this time. She watches him, listening. Daniel continues, his voice still controlled, but carrying more weight now. You don't spend over a decade playing a character like that without it becoming part of you. It's not just a job you clock in and out of. The room quiets again. And that's why, he adds, those comments get frustrating. Because they ignore the context, the years behind them. Joy nods slowly, but there's still a challenge in her tone when she speaks again. But do you think maybe you underestimate how powerful your words are? Daniel meets her gaze. No, I think I understand it very well. A slight pause. Then why say something like that at all? Joy asks, more direct now. A few audible reactions from the audience, some surprised, some intrigued. One host quietly says, Joy, like a gentle warning, but she doesn't pull back. Daniel doesn't look irritated, but he's no longer relaxed either. His answers are sharper now, more deliberate. Because, he says, in that moment, I was being honest about how I felt. Joy responds immediately. Even if it sends the wrong message? Daniel shakes his head slightly. I don't believe honesty is the wrong message. The audience reacts again, split this time. Some applause, some silence. Joy leans forward again, her voice still calm but firmer. But there's a responsibility that comes with that level of fame. Daniel nods once. There is. And part of that responsibility, she continues, is understanding how your words affect people who look up to you. Daniel holds her gaze for a second longer than before. I understand that. Do you? She presses. Now the tension peaks, not explosive, but unmistakably intense. There's a collective intake of breath from the audience. Another host jumps in quickly. I think what Joy's trying to say is, there's a balance, right? Between being honest and being mindful of the audience. Daniel shifts his focus briefly to her, nodding. There is a balance. Joy doesn't let the moment slip. And do you think you always found that balance? Daniel pauses again. This time it's longer. The kind of pause that makes everyone in the room sit a little straighter. Finally, he answers. No, he says. The honesty catches even Joy slightly off guard. The audience reacts, some soft claps, a few surprised murmurs. Daniel continues before anyone can jump in. I don't think anyone does. Not perfectly. That softens the edge just a little. One of the hosts smiles gently. That's fair. Joy nods too, but she's still focused. So you admit there were moments where you crossed that line. Daniel considers the wording, then replies carefully. I admit there were moments where I could have expressed myself better. Joy gives a small, almost satisfied nod. That's all I'm saying. But Daniel isn't done. And I've said that before, he adds. What I don't agree with is the idea that those moments define my entire relationship with the role, or the audience. The audience claps again, this time more firmly. Joy listens, then responds. But they become part of the narrative. Daniel nods. Yes, and narratives can be incomplete. Another host smiles slightly, sensing an opening to ease things. That's a very diplomatic way of putting it. A small laugh breaks from the audience. Finally, a hint of lightness. Daniel smiles faintly too, but it doesn't fully reach his eyes. It's also true. Joy leans back now, folding her hands on the table. So if you could go back, would you change what you said? Daniel doesn't hesitate this time. No. That answer lands differently. The audience reacts again, some applause, some audible, oh sounds. Joy raises her eyebrows slightly. You wouldn't. Daniel shakes his head. I would say it differently, but I wouldn't pretend I didn't feel that way in that moment. Now the room is fully locked in. This isn't just a debate anymore. It's personal perspective versus public expectation, unfolding in real time. And neither side is backing down. The camera cuts briefly to the audience, faces focused, some nodding, others whispering to each other. Back at the table, the hosts exchange quick glances. Because now it's clear. This conversation isn't winding down. It's building. The moment Daniel says he wouldn't take it back, even if he'd phrase it differently, you can feel the temperature in the room shift again, this time sharper. There's a mix of reactions from the audience, some clapping, others clearly unsure. It's no longer a comfortable conversation. It's a line being drawn, and everyone can see it. Joy leans forward again, her voice steady, but there's a noticeable edge now. So even knowing how people reacted, you'd still stand by the feeling behind it? Daniel doesn't look away. Yes. A few people in the audience let out quiet, wow reactions. One of the hosts quickly tries to soften the impact. I think what Daniel's saying is that he's not going to rewrite his own experience just to make it more palatable. Joy cuts in gently but firmly. I understand that, but we're not talking about just any experience. We're talking about something millions of people connect to. Daniel nods. I know, and that comes with weight, Joy adds. Daniel's response is immediate this time. So does doing the job. That line hits harder than expected. The audience reacts, some applause, some surprised laughter, but there's tension underneath it. Joy tilts her head slightly. No one's denying that it's hard work. Daniel leans in just a fraction, not aggressive, but more engaged than before. It's not just hard work. It's scrutiny, expectation, physical strain, constant pressure to meet an idea that's bigger than you are. The room quiets again. And when you're in that, he continues, you don't always speak in perfect, polished sentences. Joy listens, then responds. But that's exactly when people are listening the most. There's a pause. Daniel exhales slightly, almost like he's choosing his next words more carefully now. Then maybe people should also listen with more context. A few claps break out in the audience, this time louder. Joy doesn't smile. Or maybe public figures should speak with more awareness. Now it's a direct clash, no soft edges left. One of the other hosts leans in quickly, trying to create space. Okay, I think we're getting to something interesting here, because this isn't just about one comment, it's about how public figures communicate under pressure. Daniel nods slightly, but his focus stays on Joy. Joy continues, her tone still controlled, but unmistakably firm. You've been in this industry long enough to know that one sentence can define years of work in the public eye. Daniel answers without hesitation. And I think that's a problem. The audience reacts, strong applause from one side, quieter murmurs from another. Joy raises her eyebrows. So it's the audience's fault now? Daniel shakes his head. No, it's the system. The way things are amplified, repeated, reduced. Joy responds quickly, but the audience is part of that system. Daniel nods once. Yes, but so is the media. So are platforms. So are the people who choose which clips get replayed and which don't. Now the conversation feels bigger than just the two of them. The audience leans in again. This isn't just a disagreement anymore. It's a broader conversation unfolding in real time. One host tries again to bridge the gap. I think there's truth on both sides here. There's responsibility in what you say, and also responsibility in how it's interpreted. Joy glances at her, then back at Daniel. But interpretation starts with the words. Daniel's expression tightens just slightly, and meaning goes beyond them. A brief silence, the kind that feels heavier than anything said out loud. Joy shifts in her chair, then asks, do you ever feel like maybe you pushed back against Bond because you didn't want to be defined by it? Daniel doesn't answer immediately. It's a different kind of question, less confrontational on the surface, but deeper. Finally, he nods. Of course. The audience murmurs again, this time more understanding. Joy continues. And is that where some of that frustration came from? Daniel considers it. Partly. There's a slight softening in the room, but it doesn't last long. Because, Joy adds, some fans might hear that and think, you didn't appreciate what it gave you. Daniel looks at her directly. I appreciated it enough to give it 10 years of my life. That line lands hard. The audience responds instantly. Loud applause, a few cheers. Joy nods, acknowledging the point, but she doesn't step back completely. And that's significant. Daniel adds more firmly now. It's not just significant. It's everything. It shaped a huge part of my career. One of the hosts jumps in with a lighter tone, trying to ease things again. And a pretty unforgettable Bond, I might add. The audience laughs and claps, grateful for the moment of relief. Daniel smiles briefly. Thank you. But Joy isn't finished. Then why? She asks. Does it sound like you're distancing yourself from it? The room tightens again. Daniel's smile fades. I'm not distancing myself, he says. I'm moving forward. Joy responds quickly. Those can look the same to people watching. Daniel nods. I understand that. But do you? She presses again. A few audible reactions from the audience. Some tension, some curiosity. Daniel leans back slightly this time, his tone still calm but more deliberate. Yes, I do. That doesn't mean I have to stay in one place to prove appreciation. That earns a strong reaction, applause, a few that's right comments from the crowd. Joy crosses her arms again lightly, considering him. So for you, appreciation doesn't mean loyalty to the role? Daniel shakes his head. It means respecting what it was, and knowing when it's time to let it go. The audience responds again, this time more unified. There's a brief pause at the table. One of the hosts looks between them, then says with a small smile, "This is one of those conversations where nobody's really wrong, but nobody's backing down either." A few laughs break the tension slightly. Joy smiles faintly at that, but her focus stays on Daniel. I just think when you're in a position like that, people expect a certain level of gratitude in how you speak about it. Daniel nods once. And I think gratitude can exist without perfection. That line lands quietly, but powerfully. The audience reacts with softer applause this time, more thoughtful than before. Joy doesn't interrupt. For the first time in a while, she lets the moment sit. Daniel adds, his tone calmer now, less defensive. I'm proud of what I did with Bond. I always have been. That shifts something. The tension doesn't disappear, but it changes. Because now it's not just disagreement. It's two perspectives trying to exist in the same space. The camera cuts briefly across the panel, hosts exchanging glances, subtle nods, the kind that say this has gone further than expected. Back at the table, Joy finally leans back a little more, her tone easing just slightly. That's good to hear. Daniel gives a small nod. It's the truth. There's a pause. A real one this time, not tense, just quiet. The kind of pause that usually signals a transition. But the energy hasn't fully settled. Because even though the sharpest edges have softened, the conversation has already crossed into something deeper and more personal than anyone at that table planned. And everyone watching can feel it. This isn't over yet. The quiet moment lingers just a little longer than expected. You can feel everyone at the table recognizing it. That point where a conversation could either settle or take one last turn. One of the hosts exhales softly and smiles, trying to guide things toward calmer ground. Well, I think what we can all agree on is that you gave audiences something unforgettable. The audience applauds, this time warmer, more unified, almost relieved to have something they can all get behind. Daniel nods, a small, appreciative smile returning. Thank you. That means a lot. Joy looks at him, her expression no longer sharp, but still thoughtful. And I'll say this, I think people respond strongly because they care. That's where all of this comes from. Daniel meets her gaze and nods again. I understand that. There's a brief pause, but it feels different now, less tense, more reflective. Another host adds gently, and maybe that's the takeaway here. People connect deeply, and sometimes that connection makes conversations like this complicated. A few soft laughs ripple through the audience. Joy gives a small smile. That's one way to put it. Daniel lets out a quiet breath, the kind that signals a release of pressure. It's part of the job. The tone has shifted again, not back to light and easy, but to something more balanced. One of the hosts claps her hands lightly together. Okay, before we wrap up, we do want to talk about what you're working on now, because you are moving forward, as you said. Daniel nods. Yes. The conversation transitions, this time successfully, into his upcoming projects. He talks about wanting to explore different characters, different kinds of storytelling. His voice sounds more relaxed again, though there's still a trace of the earlier intensity beneath it. The audience listens closely, but you can tell they haven't forgotten what just happened. Even as he speaks about new roles, there's an undercurrent in the room. Something that made this interview different. Something that made it real. Joy chimes in again, but her tone is noticeably softer now. I think it'll be interesting for people to see you outside of that world again. Daniel smiles slightly. I hope so. Another host jokes, no more intense spy training? Daniel laughs quietly. Not for a while. The audience laughs with him, the tension finally easing into something lighter. But it's not erased. Because moments like that don't just disappear. They stay with the people watching. The segment begins to wrap. Daniel Craig, everyone, one of the hosts says, smiling toward the camera. The audience applauds, loud, genuine, a mix of admiration and lingering emotion. Daniel stands, shaking hands with the hosts. When he reaches Joy, there's a brief moment, short but noticeable. They exchange a few quiet words off mic. Both nod. It's not dramatic. It's not cold. But it's real. He gives a final wave to the audience and walks off stage. The cameras stay on the table for a moment longer. And that's when it continues, because conversations like that don't just end when the guest leaves. One of the hosts exhales. Well, that was something. The audience laughs lightly. Joy leans back in her chair, adjusting slightly. It was a conversation. Another host smiles. A real one. Joy nods. And I respect that he stood his ground. That gets a small reaction from the audience, some applause. But, she adds, I still think public figures have to be careful with how they express certain things. There are murmurs, some agreeing, some not. Another host responds, and I think he acknowledged that in his own way. Joy shrugs lightly. Maybe. The discussion continues for another minute or two, shorter now, more reflective. The hosts share their perspectives, but there's less tension, more analysis. The segment ends. But the moment doesn't. Because almost immediately, online, on phones, across social media, the clips start spreading. Viewers begin reacting in real time. Some posts praise Daniel Craig for staying calm and standing by his words. Others side with Joy Behar, saying she asked the questions many fans were thinking. Clips from The View start circulating. Short segments of the most intense exchanges replayed, analyzed, debated. Comments flood in. Finally, a real conversation on daytime TV. He handled that with class. She wasn't wrong to push back. He should have just apologized. The debate splits audiences, but keeps growing. Media outlets pick it up. Headlines frame it in different ways, some calling it a tense exchange, others calling it a refreshingly honest moment. By the afternoon, it's trending. Clips are dissected. Body language analyzed. Tone debated. People aren't just talking about what was said, they're talking about how it was said. Later that day, behind the scenes, sources say Daniel kept things professional. No outbursts, no complaints. He spoke briefly with producers, thanked the crew, and left. On the host's side, the conversation continues off camera too, more measured, more reflective, but still engaged. Because that's what moments like this do. They don't just create headlines. They create discussion. And back on screen, the clip keeps playing. That moment, I wouldn't take it back. That pause before he said no. That exchange where neither side fully gave in. It becomes one of those talk show moments people revisit. Not because it was explosive, but because it felt real. Because it didn't follow a script. Because it showed what happens when two strong perspectives meet in front of a live audience. And neither one chooses to step away from the point they believe in. And that's what keeps people watching. That's what keeps people talking. And that's exactly why moments like this don't fade quickly. They stick. They circulate. They turn into conversations far beyond the studio. So what do you think about this moment? Was Daniel Craig right to stand by his honesty? Or did Joy Behar have a point about responsibility? Share your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the Star Talks for more real talk show stories.